Welcome to the Holy Smokes Podcast, a show about faith, friendship, fine tobacco, and drink. I'm Steve Reiter. I'm in Papa P's in Franklin, Tennessee. And we got a crowd here. We have a Holy Smokes crowd.
Yeah, good group. A lot of handsome men here. This guy here, he's very handsome.
Only
he's
a couple.
talking the same time I am.
Let's be honest. Only a couple of them are handsome.
Only a couple are handsome? Okay.
The rest of us are just mugs.
I see some handsome guys here, though.
But I'm with Ken Coleman.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Ken, thanks for being on, my man.
Excited to be here. This is my group.
Tell me about who Ken Coleman is. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the Tidewater area of Virginia. So, pastor's kid. Grew up there, and my mom and dad were church planners. So that's all I've ever known is kind of growing up in ministry. And then I go off to Liberty University, get a poli-sci degree, get an opportunity to work on a congressional race at 19. And
when you say poli-sci,
political science.
Okay. For those of us lay people.
That's right. So I go right into politics. I'm working for the governor at 22.
Whoa.
And I'm on that path until my early 30s, at which point Stacy and I start a family.
So what were you doing in politics? Like what
campaigns.
Sorts of roles?
So I started out working on a congressional race at 19. So you're running a race to beat another opponent, right? So it's Republican versus Democrat, and I'm working on a campaign and learning the ropes. And then all of a sudden, we get an opportunity to move on. And I find myself working for the governor of Virginia at 22.
Yeah.
And that was a wild ride. You go from campaigning every day to governing, which is a very different pace.
What were you doing?
I was special assistant to the governor. So moving legislation from the governor's office, moving it through the different agencies, and you're trying to get it through to the House.
What did they not teach you in college when you were learning political science? What are some of those lessons in politics?
Well, they don't teach you how to actually politic.
Really?
Right. So,
really?
Yeah, they teach you the history of politics and the art and science of it, like Machiavelli and things of that nature, political theory. But at the end of the day, you got to learn how to do what Kay does well. And that's sit down with a bureaucrat who's been running a government agency for 20 years, and you're the new flavor in town. You got the new governor. He's going to be there after the governor leaves, and you're 22 and he's 52, and you're trying to get him to buy into the legislation so that he can give you the data that you need or the support that you need. Then you got to go sit with members of the House of Delegates or a state senator, and you're representing the governor, and you're essentially lobbying to move legislation forward. So you learn the art of persuasion at its finest, because it's you're not selling a copier. You're fighting for an ideal, and you're fighting for it in a very complex environment of bureaucracy and then party politics.
And you're fighting within that bureaucracy against people who just don't want to change.
Exactly.
They've been doing something the exact same way, and this is what they're comfortable with, and oh, shoot, now I got to change.
That's right.
You're going to add work to my plate.
That's right.
And they're going to fight.
And philosophically, they disagree with you. And so they try to keep their job.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you got government bureaucrats they all vote, so they've got their own political persuasion, but they're apolitical in their position. And so that's a unique dynamic. So I would basically, Chris and I are good buddies. I think it's the art of communication early on. You learn how to communicate in a way that's effective. And you're a kid. That's the other thing. You're 22, and so there's a whole lot you don't know, and you're representing the governor. So it's a great experience to learn how to communicate effectively.
How do you think, looking back, how do you think you did as a 22-year-old?
Well, I think I was too brash.
Really?
Sure. I mean...
Aren't we all?
Yeah, at 22, you don't know what you don't know, so you're just so idealistic, and you're sitting there, and you think you're sitting there, and you think you have the governor's power behind you. But you really don't. They're a government bureaucrat who's they have to put up with you. Do you know what I mean? They have to take your meeting, but they don't have to agree with you. They don't have to make it easy on you. So I learned pretty early on the likability factor.
Really?
Yeah, that's what you got to learn how to be likable.
Was there an aha moment when it came to that likability?
Yeah, I think after a couple of meetings getting treated like the plague, I think you learn pretty quickly, they don't like me. Is it me? Is it the position? It was a combination of both. And so I learned how to sit down with an older bureaucrat and spend the first 5 minutes getting to know them and finding some commonality. And so that was a very early lesson in the art of persuasion, is the art of connection. In other words, can I find something that we have common ground on? And so all of a sudden, if I can get them to like me, then I can get them to trust me. Yeah. It's not the other way around.
Yeah. Was there a person that really kind of helped you? Did you kind of be like, I don't know what's happening? And, and like an older mentor kind of come alongside?
So his name was Don Mosley. He was the Deputy Secretary of Administration, which in Virginia is the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
And so he was my direct boss. I worked for the Secretary of Administration, but Don Mosley was an old guy, multimillionaire, and he got the government appointee, and he went to a couple of meetings with me, and I'll never forget, he said, let me tell you something, Coleman. He goes, you got all the tools, kid. He goes, but you're too eager. You're too forceful. He goes, just let it come to you. And so he was giving me the advice of just make the connection, just make the conversation. They got to play ball, so you don't have to force it. You just got to learn how to relationship it, he used to call it all the time. So he was a great mentor. And he would sit in meetings and then tell me everything I did wrong. But like in a very loving, like, it was me and two other guys that were all in our early 20s. And he took us under his wing and, and taught us how to communicate on a personal level.
Yeah. So 22 years old, you're working for the governor. You're starting to learn the way the politics machine goes.
Yeah.
Did you move to another position or did you?
I lasted 1 year.
That's it?
Bureaucracy moves at a pace of, if I were to take a glue bottle and just turn it over. And the campaign pace is like this. It's 17-hour, 18-hour days, fast, and I was dying on the vine. So I remember being there about a year, and I told my wife, I said, I can't do this any longer. So I sent an email to about 30 guys from my college network, and I got an opportunity to come to Nashville and interview for a VP job for a speakers bureau that's still here, one of the top speaker bureaus in the country called Premier Speakers Bureau.
Yeah.
And it was everything that bureaucracy wasn't. Fast-paced, a lot of connections. I would be booking celebrity speakers, building my Rolodex. That was a thing back then. If you say Rolodex now to a millennial or a Gen Z, they look at you like you got horns coming out of your head.
Michael Smallbone?
I know Michael, yeah. I know all the small bones.
He's a dear friend of mine.
Yeah, so I'm older than he is, but we go way back. So anyway, to your listening audience, we had a mutual connection there from our live audience. So I took that opportunity, and that moved me to Nashville, and I was probably 24.
Yeah.
It was a great experience. Then I went on to work for John Maxwell, the leadership guru. Spent 3 or 4 years with John. And then John sold his company, and I find myself early 30s, out on my own, a lot of consulting gigs. Was helping with messaging, strategic messaging, how to take content and turn it into commerce. And did that for several years and got to a point one day where I woke up and I was like, I don't think I'm going to run for office. Because the backstory to all this was I felt like I was called to run for office at 16. And so I went that path, got into the private sector to build a private resume, if you will, a private sector resume.
Connections.
Yeah, but just to be able to have a business resume, not an insider in politics. Yeah. And at 31, 32, I'm starting to get to a crisis of identity because I didn't feel like I was supposed to run at that moment. So if it wasn't that, what was it?
Do you have kids at the time?
No kids yet.
Okay, so you're married, no kids.
Yeah.
How was that for you to have this dream and set it aside? Kind of decide that it wasn't for you?
It's very disheartening. It's very confusing. It's a cocktail of negative emotions because you've got this clear identity for a long time, and then all of a sudden you feel like that's not it, but you don't have another answer readily available. And I think, I went through this at 30. I think a lot of guys are going through this in their 40s and 50s. And so it was very paralyzing for me because I grew up in a church context where it was like my dad would preach every Sunday.
So your dad was a pastor?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you're a PK.
PK.
All
Young
right.
people, find the will of God for your life. So I had all this
yesterday,
pressure.
I had a conversation with another PK, and I said, there's two types of PK, and really there's a subset under one. You have the compliant PKs who are either compliant and they follow their parents', the direction that their parents went, stay within the faith, and they love it, and they don't. Then you have the compliant ones that are secretly seething inside, and they rebel and they walk away. And then you have the ones that right there went batshit crazy and drinking, drugs, all that.
I was option one.
Really?
Yeah, because I was really afraid of God.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know how many guys resonate with this or our audience that are listening, but I believe that most of us see God through the lens of our earthly father until we get healthy and we get a proper view of God. And so I did not have this view of God as Abba Father. I had this view of God as this angry, authoritarian. If I sinned, I got punished. That's because I had a healthy fear of my father. So I grew up terrified of God, and that kept me. Now I'm grateful for that now because I don't have as much junk as a lot of pastors' kids do. It wasn't a healthy fear of the Lord. It was unhealthy. However, it was a fear of the Lord. And so that kept me out of a lot of trouble. But I always say that because I don't want people to think it wasn't that I was on fire for God. I was terrified of God. But that did keep me out of a lot of trouble.
Got it. So you're in this season where this dream, you're trying to find a new identity now.
Yeah.
What was going on?
Well, you're trying to figure out, did I make a mistake? So the first thing you're doing, if we've got anybody in the audience here in the room or listening in, when you don't have clear direction, what happens is you lose confidence. So I've coached 10,000 plus business people who weren't happy where they were. And so what I've learned over that amount of coaching is this. Clarity breeds confidence, and confidence breeds courage. So in the moments of life where we need courage, you cannot summon courage. You just cannot snap your finger. You can't will yourself to be courageous. The only hope you have for being courageous is to retreat back to clarity. So what happens is when you're unclear, you just seize up, right? And you're overcome with doubt and fear. By the way, quick distinction here. Fear, as I define it, is I'm afraid that something bad will happen if I step forward. Doubt is I don't believe that something good will happen if I step forward. They're cousins, but the evil one uses them both. And they hang out on our shoulders. So fear's going, if I step out, if I stay the course, something bad's going to happen. Doubt goes, what are you doing? Nothing good's going to come of this step forward. So I was in this season of fear and doubt and a cocktail and slugging it every day. And so what happens is when you are struggling with fear and doubt, you aren't clear. And so when you're not clear, you're not confident in any thought or any feeling. So what do? What do you do when you're not confident?
Not move forward.
You don't move. So the way I describe it is when you are in a car and you come up on dense fog and you can't see past the hood of the car, what do?
Slow down.
You slow down. And that's what we do. And we just go into this paralyzed state. And I was in that state for about 3 years.
Whoa. How did your wife handle that?
Well, she was very supportive because about that time we adopt our first child. And then 2.5 years later, we bring home our second son. And 3 weeks after bringing Chase home, we find out we're pregnant. So we go from 1 kid to 3 kids in about, a 2-year period. And she was so swamped. And I was paying the bills. I had my own consulting company, and I was doing all kinds of things. So I was paying the bills and all that, and I was laying awake at night when I should have been exhausted. But I couldn't sleep because I was so overwhelmed I had no clue what the next step was. And then dealing also with this unhealthy desire to perform and to be, you know what I mean? So that's all this cocktail that's going on. And it was in that moment where I realized that I had to do some life mapping and I had to do some deep work to go, wait a second, God's not a God of confusion. If I'm confused, I'm the problem. So without knowing what I know now, I began the process of clarity of who am I? And so now I can look back on it. I've coached so many people that there's 2 things you do when you're unclear. You go back to 2 things. Number 1, the environment you grew up in. How did that shape you? And how you view the world, how you see things. And then secondly, your experience up to this point in your life. Look at your experience, and what does that tell you about your heart? What does your heart long to do?
Yeah.
And you got to get the heart part first. And then when you begin to see what your heart's revealing to you, then you look at yourself and you go, what tools do I have in the form of talent that will allow me to act on what my heart is longing for? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now I have a methodology. Back then I didn't have a methodology. I was just kind of walking through and trying to figure it out.
Was there a catalyst moment, a crucible moment that set you on that path to go through that? Was there someone that came alongside you? Did you?
I love this question. So the crucible moment was God in his unbelievable providence drops me into a thing that I had nothing to do with. So I don't know if our audience here remembers, it would have been 2012-ish. Remember when Dan Cathy got blown up for saying that gay marriage was shaking your fist in the face of God and the family values thing, and it blew up, and Chick-fil-A was like, it was a big, huge thing. Well, what people don't realize is I had done some work for Dan Cathy, some consulting work and some emceeing and hosting work for Chick-fil-A. And so I started a radio show on Saturdays in Gainesville, Georgia. And Dan did me a super big favor. And he came on my show leading into Father's Day. And it's a Saturday. And this billionaire calls in from his house and does 2 segments on my show. The last segment...
Where that was said.
Yeah, well, I said to him, I didn't ask him about that at all.
Okay.
We were talking about his relationship with his father, Truett Cathy, and all this. And I said, hey, we're going to commercial break. We got 2 minutes. It's a hard stop. And I say to Dan Cathy, Dan, give us the final word, challenge fathers. He says a couple things, and then he goes, but I'm concerned about America today. We're trying to redefine marriage. And how dare we shake our fist in the hand of God, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's strong. We go to commercial break, finish the show. My producer puts it up on my little podcast. And 2 weeks later, I'm in a meeting. And about a week before that, he had gone on the Baptist Press, which is the Southern Baptist newspaper. And he said, Chick-fil-A's unashamedly family values, if you remember that. That started the controversy. Well, a well-known gay activist starts searching Dan Cathy interviews, pulls up my little podcast. Now, keep in mind, I'm on Saturdays right now. Do you know how many people listen to Saturday talk radio?
Very.
2 people.
Very
my
little.
Producer, because he had to be there, and my wife, because she's a good woman, right? She's listening. So when I come home, she can say, good job, babe. So this gay blogger...
You're lucky, because my late wife, she never listened to my shows.
Exactly.
Never. My mom does. My mom does.
Right. So to speed this story along, this gay blogger goes on and listens to the entire 2 segments, 20 minutes of content, listens to that last part, pulls it out, and says, this is Dan Cathy on the Ken Coleman Show, puts it on his blog. The Huffington Post, which was basically the Drudge Report back then, the Huffington Post pulls it and puts it on their gay page. So my phone starts buzzing. I'm in a meeting, and my phone keeps buzzing. I go voicemail, because it's my web guy. Finally, after the 4th call, I say to my friend, I got to step out and take this. It's the 4th call. I answer the phone. Pato, what's going on? He goes, your website has crashed 50 times in the last hour, because I get the alerts. And he goes, we finally traced it, and it's coming from the Huffington Post gay page. To which point I'm like, did a college buddy of mine post some picture?
I want that story.
So anyway, I'm literally freaking out, though, because I'm thinking somebody's played a joke on me. I have no context for this. So I go to the website. I see that they've pulled the Dan Cathy interview. Well, so here's the deal. That's about 10:30 in the morning. By midnight that night, as I went to bed, that clip or the quote from that clip had been posted in every major newspaper in the United States, the London Daily Mail. We got a phone call from our babysitter. She was like, Ken just got mentioned on Jon Stewart's show on the Daily Show. And I'm like, it was crazy. So the next day, I get a call from CNN. They want me to go do an interview and talk about Dan Cathy. So all that to say, God, so here I am. I'd started my own radio show. I decided that broadcasting was the thing. I'm fast forwarding into the story. But you asked me, was there a crucible moment?
Yeah.
That put me on the map, and I had nothing to do with it. In other words, I didn't interview Dan about that topic. I didn't ask him about that topic. But God used that moment, and I went on CNN and handled myself very well.
Yeah.
Defended Dan, but didn't get in the middle of the controversy. Wow. Keep in mind, I have some very close gay friends at the time. I get a phone call from one of them. They fly me on a private jet to meet with a very well-known CEO who's gay. And all of a sudden, I'm in this conversation about Christians and gays getting along.
Yeah.
And I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So that was the moment where all of a sudden, like, the radio station wanted me on daily.
And that flight was obviously after.
It was after all this
all
broke.
the blow up.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is God used that moment to give me a platform that I had nothing to do with, and yet it gave me a lot of exposure. And through that, the radio station was like, we want you on every day now. So I had my own show that was Monday through Friday. That was the beginning.
So you're here in Franklin.
I'm in Atlanta.
You're living in Atlanta.
Yeah,
okay, so you left Tennessee.
That's right. Mike Huckabee has a national show. He has me on. Dave Ramsey's paying attention to all this. So all of this led to the opportunities that I have now, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was this moment that I didn't orchestrate. My point is God was pulling the strings. I literally had nothing to do with it. But that was the moment where I got the next set of eyeballs. And all of a sudden it was like, okay. And so that began the journey to where Dave calls me 2 years later and says, I want you to join my team. Dave Ramsey, that was a rocket ship. So
what year was that? What year did you get there?
I joined Dave in 2014.
Okay.
So this all happened in about 2012. So for 2 years I was in Atlanta doing the daily show, building my muscle as a radio guy, a talk radio guy, learning how to communicate under pressure, all that stuff.
Let's go back to that. You're on the private plane, and your friend calls. You're on your way to a meeting.
Yeah.
One, how'd that conversation with a friend go? And two, how'd that meeting go?
Well, my friend was like, hey, the CEO, he really liked what you had to say on CNN. He thought you were fair. He wants to build inroads with evangelicals. So this whole meeting is...
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. It was bizarro, but I felt like God put me in that situation. And so I walk into this guy's office, and he gives me a tour of his facilities and all this. And then he sits me down, and he's got his partner, and they were just firing questions at me. What do you think about this? Do you hate us? It was like really intense. And over about a 2-hour period, we got to the point where he finally got to the point, he said, you know what? He goes, I understand you now. And he said, I can tell that you're not a bigot. I appreciate what you believe. I don't agree with you, but I like you.
Yeah.
And that was just one of those weird kind of God things that was all private. I've not shared much about that. But it was a great moment for God to validate that we as Christians can get into the secular world. We can take a stand but not be jerks. And I defended Dan on CNN, but I got the invite to hang out with this guy opposite end of the spectrum of me. But after kind of pushing me, and I stood my ground, but also was very love-filled.
Yeah.
It's possible to disagree with somebody vehemently, but also get to a place where you understand them.
Yes.
And what came away from that is what I love about Holy Smokes. I'm going to bring this back to a cigar. I think a cigar, if you use it properly, Kay, is a bridge. Because I can sit across from somebody and have a cigar in over 30 minutes if I'm willing to ask questions and listen. I can walk away, still disagree with them, but understand them. And I think that that's what's going on in America today. We've become more and more polarized because of social media and 24/7 media, and everybody's being labeled by who you vote for versus who you are. And that's why I love conversation. I said on CNN that day, it's somewhere on YouTube buried, but I said to Brooke Baldwin, the anchor, I said, I don't care what anybody says about Dan Cathy, because a man with an experience is not at the mercy of a man with an opinion.
Ooh, say that again.
A man with an experience is not at the mercy of a man with an opinion. In other words, I know who Dan Cathy is. I've sat with him. I know his top executives. The man's not a bigot. He wouldn't hurt a fly. And I said that it's time for us to put down the pitchforks and pick up some coffee cups. I'm going to amend that statement today and say, it's time for us to put down the pitchforks and pick up the sticks.
There we go.
And let's have a conversation with people. And let's just seek to understand them. Because it's my experience, having been in politics, It's my experience co-hosting the largest money podcast in the world, The Ramsey Show. You're not going to change anybody's opinion by sharing your opinion. You've got to be able to understand where they are. And then when they question your philosophy or your methodology, you've got to be able to, in a winsome way, show them a path forward and why you've chosen to walk that path. It's the only reason anybody will ever change their behavior. Can't change their mind. But if you can change their heart, you got a shot. And the only way you're going to change somebody's heart,
Get to know them.
is to understand them.
Yes.
Because if you lead the way by understanding them, they'll then potentially seek to understand you. I tell young people all the time, the number one thing you can do when it comes to networking and net weaving, we got the master net weaver, Kay, sitting across from me about 5 feet away. What Kay does really well, and what I've sought to do, is to be interested. And the more you can be interested in somebody, the more interesting you become. In other words, it's the humanness in us. If I sit across from John here, who's sitting to my left, and I meet John for the first time, and I ask John a bunch of questions about him, at some point, John's humanness is going to go, oh, this has all been about me. I probably should ask Ken a little bit about him. Like, that's the default mode, unless you're with a narcissist, at which point you can't do anything about it. So I think that the key is if we can be interested in other people,
That's huge.
we have the best chance of becoming interesting.
That's huge. I mean, I've seen that in my life. So a little bit about me. I worked 15 years for Jim Dobson at Focus on the Family and Family Talk.
Sure.
I was his chief audio engineer. Once I got out of that bubble, that evangelical conservative bubble, and really it started in 2004, which was probably, I'd say, 8 years before I actually left. I left the Republican Party because I saw they were really full of shit. They didn't really care about defunding Planned Parenthood. It was a big talking point so they could raise money. They didn't really care about small government.
We're keeping it real here.
They were just interested in raising money.
Yeah, right.
They wanted it as a talking point when the Democrats were in power.
Right.
And I started to get to this point where I'm like, my brother and I are very opposite politically. Now we're a little bit more closer because I've migrated more to the middle. But we're very opposite politically.
Right.
And I want to get to know my brother more. And why does he feel this way?
Right.
And I want to get to know more people outside of my conservative evangelical church bubble.
Right.
So I'm going to start to try and do things in such a way that I'm starting to get to know different people that think very differently than me.
Yep.
And it's just, once I got to that point, wow, you grew up in a very different environment than I did. And, you know, I don't believe what you believe, but I can see how you got to that point of believing whatever, about whatever.
That's right.
That I mean, that's a big government or, you know, abortion or whatever.
That's right.
And it's just, And part of that comes from those early years at Focus because we had every freaking denomination under the sun. And because the broadcasting team was such that we were staffed so when things were hot and heavy, we were able to take that. And then when things were normal, we had time to screw around in the hallways and play games and hang out and talk. And between Christmas and New Year's, we'd bring in TVs and video games, and we'd just play video games all day because there was really no work to do. And we'd sit down and we'd have these theological conversations. And yeah, wow. I don't necessarily think that, but I know you because I've been sweating and bleeding and in these trenches with you, and I love you as a human being, but you give me something to chew on.
That's right.
And it's something that we so desperately need. So it's beautiful that back in 2012, you had these conversations with people who thought very differently than you. So good on you, dude. Seriously.
Well, again, I think I stepped out and God stepped in. I love telling that story because my break in broadcasting had nothing to do with anything that I did. And I really believe that. I think when we step out and show ourselves faithful, God goes, okay, anybody who's paying attention to Coleman knows he had nothing to do with this, so I get the glory. And that would be my encouragement to anybody who's kind of on the fence about stepping out. You know, the Bible says in Hebrews, without faith, it is impossible to please God. And I think God's like, would you just pay attention? If you want the map to success, a lot of it has to do with walking in faith. And that's different degrees at different times. But nonetheless, that's how that happened.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
It was great.
So come back to Tennessee.
So I'm doing my thing in Atlanta, and Dave Ramsey calls, and he says, I want you to come join my team. And he gives me this. He's like, I want you to do this, 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 and this. And
What were those things?
So the host of the Entree Leadership Podcast, which at the time still is a top leadership podcast, and be the host of my YouTube channel, host all of our live events. And he goes, I know you've got a voice, and I know you got something to say. We're not ready for that right now. And that was also a key decision for me to go, I feel like this is a seat on a rocket ship that God has kicked the door open, so I got to walk through it. But it wasn't the ideal scenario, but it was the right thing. And so I took a step of faith, said yes. 3 years later, he comes to me, he goes, I know you're ready. You've paid your dues. What do you want to do? What's your voice? What's your thing? And then 2017 began to develop the methodology.
How hard was that for you to wrestle with? Kind of almost losing your voice and becoming not necessarily, it's harsh to say a puppet for someone else, but it's becoming a figurehead supporting someone else.
No, I think you've nailed it. It was very hard, to be candid. There were times I was introducing other Ramsey personalities that didn't have the experience that I had. Quite frankly, I didn't think they had the depth. They hadn't written books. I had already written a book. So it were times where I had to swallow my pride. And that's important. I'm glad you brought that up, because you have to learn the tension between persistence and patience. That's the tension that any serious person, certainly a believer, anybody who wants to be successful is going to have to wrestle with multiple times in their life. A season where you got to get up and persist, but you're chopping wood and the tree's not falling. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so there is this natural tension, whether you're a person of faith or not, between, all right, I'm getting up and I'm hustling. You know, there's an old song, every day I'm shuffling, whatever that stupid song is. But it's like, there are days where you're shuffling.
We need more of that. We need more. The guys want more.
Right. I think it says hustling.
Yeah, but it's also shuffling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, go listen to the lyric. And there are times where that's what you feel like, right? You just feel like you're barely moving. And I had to deal with that, and that's all pride, 100% pride. So you learn how to eat it a bite at a time. I mean, really, that's how. Well, the old phrase is swallow your pride, and that implies that you can just swallow it whole. I've never had that small amount of pride that I could just swallow it. My pride is the chewable type. Like, you got to cut it, chew it. It's like, am I right? I don't think we can swallow our pride. I think pride is a chew it, man, on a daily basis. That's my experience anyway. I may have more pride than all these humble guys I'm looking at, but I think that's more realistic. And so that's how I dealt with it.
So you get the green light.
Yeah.
And what did that look like? And when Dave had that conversation with you, all right, it's your time, how did things change?
Well, God orchestrated that too. So Dave says to me, I think it's March of 14, you ready to go? You've earned it. Start working on it. Great. I'm on vacation in May. 2 months later, I get a call from one of the executives at Ramsey. They said, you sitting down? I go, no, but should I be? He goes, you probably should sit down. I don't know what this is. And he tells me, he goes, Dave just cut a deal with SiriusXM. We haven't signed it yet, so don't get too excited, but it's probably going to happen. And Dave's got a whole channel, and there's other Ramsey personalities. There's like 5 of us. And he goes, none of them can do radio. So Dave basically said, Coleman can do radio, so give him a daily show leading into my show. Wow. And the guy, Jeremy goes, so what do you think? And I go, I'm in. I mean, I don't even know what the show is. There was no design for it. It was just sit down and start taking calls. And I'd never coached people on the air, so that's a skill set that it's not easily developed. You got to suck at it. And Dave, gave me a show, an hour-long show every day. 5 days a week on SiriusXM, dream come true, but I sucked for 6 months. Just learning how to coach people succinctly, in a 6 to 8 minute window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine
trying
to do that.
And I couldn't imagine it either, but I figured it out. So, now coaching people, if I get to coach an executive or somebody and I got an hour, I feel like I'm cheating.
Yeah.
If I can look at them and see their body language, that's cheating. All these calls that I've done are over the phone, so you now have to listen for things. So I could get on a phone call with anybody in the country, and within about 30 seconds, I can hear what's going on. I can hear their emotion. But that only comes with like time. And so, but that's a valuable skill. So, Dave and God teamed up. And again, my story is these big moments where every time I feel like I'm in the wilderness and I feel like I'm Moses and on the backside of the wilderness, and all of a sudden here comes the burning bush. And I feel like that's what's happened with me, because I think this is true of all of us, but I said this in a Bible study this morning, so I'll be very vulnerable here. One of the things I'm learning about me at 50, and I gave my heart to Christ at 5, and God's been so good to me, but I know so much about my faith. I know a lot. I can quote scripture, I could do 2 shots of the strongest stuff behind that bar. You could spin me around 5 times, put me in front of several thousand people, and I can come up with a 3-point talk and nail it. I could preach a sermon on demand. But lest you guys think I'm being prideful right now, wait for this part. My faith is nowhere near where it needs to be. And I'm learning just now at 50 that I don't trust God as much as I think I do.
Ooh.
And so I'm one of these guys that God has to get in a place of total submission and trust. And then he goes, all right, now you're ready. So I'm looking forward to the next 2 decades because I think that I don't think I'll have to go through it that way. But that was my story. And that is my story, is that those moments have come after I've gotten to a place where I'm like, okay, God, I can't manufacture this. There's nothing I can do to manufacture what I want to happen. And when I get into a place of submission, then he moves. So that's my story.
Talk about coaching. What is coaching to you?
Coaching to me is asking, listening, observing, and then revealing. A good coach never tells somebody what to do. A good coach gets them to the point where they begin to see. In other words, if you're going to learn a new sport, a really good coach in teaching a new sport, whether it be to a 5-year-old learning the fundamentals of soccer, or Tiger Woods, the greatest golfer of all time, trying to figure out what's going on with his swing, the really effective coach does those things. The asking is a form of digging. So the reason I said it the way I said it is that's the rhythm. I'm going to ask, I'm going to listen, I'm going to ask, and each time I ask, I'm going a couple levels deeper. And as I'm going deeper, keep in mind, as I'm listening, all I'm doing is I'm getting out of the way and letting the person I'm coaching hear themselves. And then I go a little deeper, and I listen again, and you're really trying to get them to get to the conclusion first. But then at some point, once you reveal to them, they've already seen it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So once you go, here's what I'm seeing, they're like, oh, totally. Well, they think that you revealed something great to them and you haven't. You just uncovered everything. And the art of coaching is, again, to take a person from confusion to clarity.
How'd you get into it?
Dave Ramsey gave me a show on SiriusXM and said, I'm not kidding you, and said, you're going to coach people who are struggling professionally. And so I was an interviewer.
Why that out of everything that you could possibly talk about?
Well, because he knew I wanted to help people. So I always had so the struggle that I shared early, that led me to, by the way, we all find a passion for a problem that we've dealt with. You look at the greatest entrepreneurs, all they did was come up with a solution to a problem that they were either interested in or they were experiencing. That's the great entrepreneur. They just go, this is a problem for me, or this is a problem I'm seeing other people deal with, and I'm either bothered by it or fascinated by it. And then the entrepreneur goes, they keep digging and they find a solution. So when I went through that as a guy who grew up in the church, listening to my dad say, find the will of God for your life. And I felt like going, Dad, could you tell me how? And I think in a lot of churches, we do a lot of Christians disservice because we're not preaching practicality. We're preaching this, find the will of God for your life. And these people are sitting there going, how do I do that? And as a result, we have a lot of Christians that are sitting in the pews waiting for God to tap them on the shoulder and show them that Fidelity investment green line. Have you ever seen those commercials?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is what I do to become rich. And I think that's what Christians think. They go, God's going to show me this green arrow. This man's pointing at me. He feels it. And so they're sitting there going, okay, I'm just waiting on God. And God's going, no, I'm waiting on you. And so in my own journey, it was realizing I had a passion to help people go, the will of God for your life as it relates to work. So I believe that Genesis chapter 2 is the command for us to go work. He sends Adam and Eve out, and he says in Genesis chapter 2, go subdue the earth. Well, if you look at the word behind subdue in the scripture, it actually means to go create. We look at subdue as this like power play or this, but what God is saying is I'm saying to you, go out there and create. The world is your masterpiece. It is your empty canvas to go create. Keep in mind, the Bible makes it very clear also that we are created in His image. We are His handiwork. So God, the Creator, created us, so therefore we are creators. So this idea that we work to live, in other words, we work to provide, we work for provision, that's a half-truth. That's actually, Satan has distorted that. I believe we work for contribution, and it is through our contribution that God gives us provision. So I believe God created us to contribute.
So you get the show. Were you ever formally trained on coaching, or?
No. And that's what I'm trying to say. I wasn't trained at all. Dave literally goes, we got to have a show. We have a deadline. And Dave and his, what's crazy about Ramsey is he really believed that I could do it.
Did you believe you could do it? Honestly.
I did.
Okay.
I did, but I have no coaching certification at all.
Yeah.
But if you asked me if I've been trained, I went, I'll put my training up against any, and boy, this is going to hack some people off that are in the coaching business. And this is not said from hubris.
Yeah.
I would take my training and put it up against the best coaching program that's out there. Because I learned everything that you're learning. I just learned it under pressure. In other words, I was not good at it early on. I would have done well to get trained, but I was trained by fire. And so if you think about the great blacksmiths, you think about colonial America, or go back to medieval times. There was no training program for being a blacksmith. Somewhere along the way, somebody just went iron, fire, hammer, right? Like, it's somewhere. Now, there eventually became an apprenticeship. And my apprenticeship was watching Dave do it every day because I was hosting the YouTube channel, so I'm watching Dave. And I started paying attention to everything Tony Robbins ever did. And then I was going in and trying my best to make a horseshoe.
I kind of feel the same way in that
Yeah,
those years I worked for Dobson, engineering, running the board,
right,
on the other side of the glass, watching the way in which he would ask questions,
right,
watching the way he would, okay, there's a little something under here, I'm going to try and dig this down.
Right.
I've had a number of people tell me, you're good at this.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
and
cool.
see, that's the key point. The best way to learn, and this is, if you've got any young fathers listening, please hear me on this. If I could give you one piece and only one piece of advice about being a father, is the best way for all of us to learn is under pressure.
Oh.
We have removed the pressure. We've removed the pressure from kids' lives. And so there's no stakes.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. When you got a Sirius XM show and you got real people on the other end of the phone calling you, and you know this is going to go back out over the airways, that's pressure.
Yeah.
And is it ideal? Probably not. But is it effective?
You can probably look back at some of those early shows and be like, ugh.
I'm glad you brought this up, because if you were to play me the first 6 months of my show, I'd vomit. I would just be like convulsive vomiting because it was so bad.
Yeah, I get it.
But I'm on the other side of that now. I mean, I'm plus 10,000. That's not a made-up number. It's over 10,000 people. So now it's like I've been tried by fire. And I got to share this. I just feel compelled to share this. So there are some guys that are listening to this, I think, that need to hear this. You're in the fire right now. And I want to share something with you, because I've been going through the fire personally the last several years. I love blacksmiths. If you've never watched a blacksmith at one of these like colonial homes or something, or wherever, or some like festival, go watch a blacksmith long enough to watch what he does. The first thing he does, he takes an inanimate form of iron and he sticks it in the fire. And he holds it. Sometimes he leaves it there and walks away. This is beautiful, right? And that iron is just sitting there in the fire. And then what does he do? Pulls it out of the fire, and it's just bright orange. Now, you think the fire's enough, right? Now what does he do? He puts it on an anvil and beats the ever-living hell out of it. And then what does he do? Shoves it back in the fire, back on the anvil, beats it, fire, beats the crap out of it, until he has shaped it to be the very thing that he purposed it to be. We've got to learn as men and as fathers the power of going through the fire. Don't run from the fire. Sit in the fire and know that when you're in the fire, next is the pounding. But on the other side of the fire and the pounding, man, is purpose. So I was trained to do it that way because there's a bigger purpose there. So I had to do it that way. That was the way I was going to have to do it. So, and I wouldn't do it any other way because, again, I just think we learn better when the stakes are high. You got to learn.
You said you've been going through the fire the last 3 years. What's been going on?
Raising kids, and I want to be careful what I say. But just parenting has been very, very hard. Dynamics that I have there, having my own pain and father pain, and then that coming through my parenting. I have a very unique dynamic, and it's just been heartbreaking. My failures, I'll tell you what it's been, and I know guys can resonate with this. My particular job is very public, and I get a lot of public praise. So imagine going to work every day, and you got a lot of people praising your work, saying nice things about you. Oh, you helped change my life, and, posing for pictures and sign this book, and it's all very affirming. And so you're winning there in a very public, affirming way. Sure. And then you go home and you feel like you're a total failure. I think a lot of guys face that. So parenting is hard, number one. Adoption is difficult. That's part of our story. And just a lot of dynamics there where it's just been very, very hard. And it's not my kids, it's not them. They didn't do, they're just being kids. I want to make sure that people understand what I'm saying. It's that learning how to do my unique family situation, I didn't do it very well. It wasn't for a lack of being involved. I was very involved. I was over-involved. So, I'm in therapy right now learning about anxious attachment.
Ooh.
Google that one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I have high standards for myself. I'm a recovering performer, right?
I get that, yeah.
And so I'll give you the context. I'm going there, Kay, so here we go. If you don't like vulnerability, you can check out. So I love my dad. My dad's a great man. He was there for me. But I struggled in school because I am a creative and my head's in the clouds. And so I was bringing home C's and D's when my aptitude test should have said that I should have been bringing home A's and B's. And my dad was a National Honor Society guy who was very frustrated with my academic performance, and he was very scared. I think he was scared that I was going to be creative, head in the clouds, not amount to anything. He was scared. And one day he got in my face. He was very angry. It was a moment of rage. And he said to me, if you don't start getting your act together academically, you're going to be pumping gas the rest of your life. Now, understand my dad's mad and he's scared.
How old are you?
14.
Okay.
And through therapy, I've been able to pinpoint that moment where, and back then, by the way, this is like 1988, so guys would pump gas for you. Some guys listen to this, they're going, what do you mean, pumping gas? It was basically he was choosing what he thought was the lowest level of employment, and he was basically threatening me. And my response was, not to his face, but my response was, you're full of crap, I'll show you. And so I developed an inner narrative in that moment that I wasn't enough and that I was going to show him that I was enough. And so here I am 50 realizing that, right? And I've been very public in my life. I've had a lot of fun, cool things. And I'm not going to drop names or drop superlatives, but I was reminded today by my therapist, he goes, you're still not celebrating stuff that you should be celebrating. Like, why?
Give an example of something you should be celebrating that you weren't, or you're not.
Okay, he said to me,
I got him.
No, not bragging, but he said to me, he goes, how was your week? And I was giving him an update. I was in New York on Friday, and for the first time, I've done a lot of Fox News and Fox Business. I'm on pretty regularly. And for the first time ever, they asked me to join one of the shows I've been on, and they asked me to sit in for the entire hour, which is a big deal. It doesn't happen very often. Normally, I just do one segment. So you might have 3 minutes, and and I do it from here. Or sometimes I'm even in New York. I may at best be on for 5 minutes. And so this is a new format, and they said, we want you to be our guest host for an entire hour. Well, emotionally, that's a big deal to me because that's another step up. And I'm looking to do more with them, and I love it. To be honest with you, I love that because it was not my topic. It was basically all political stuff and societal stuff. And I had an idea what was coming my way, but I thrive when I don't know what's coming my way. In other words, I'm one of those, most people would rather die than publicly speak. I'm the freak that goes, let's go. Put me on TV right now, no prep, I'm ready. I love that. And so I was telling him that. I was like, man, it was really great. He goes, so that's a big deal, right? And I was like, well, no. And he said, why can't you just say that that's a big deal? And I was like, I don't know. And so then we went in, and I'm not going to give you my whole therapy session. But what it really is I was a very confident kid, despite the fact that my dad wounded me there. And my whole life in high school and college, I was called by people who didn't know me, you're so cocky. I had a lot of confidence. And so what he was able to unpack today is I got to get to a point where I'm not ashamed of my confidence and not ashamed to celebrate things.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, I didn't want to come across like a cocky jerk, right? And when in all reality, it is a big freaking deal. He goes, how many people get to do that? And I was like, well, not many. And then I had a good meeting with the president of Fox Business. Like it was a great day. And I was trying to downplay it with him. And so there's a shame there. But anyway, I feel like we went too far down the therapy hole. But I mean, that's
good.
So back to why I was struggling in my personal life is that I had this enormous pressure that I built up to have this amazing fatherhood experience. And when it wasn't this like, leave it to Beaver scene, I was crushing myself. But I got great kids and great boys, and they aren't the problem. I've been the problem.
It's the way it works.
Yeah.
So often.
Yeah, but, a very well-known therapist who's a friend of mine said, as parents, we only have to get it right 30% of the time. So I'm like, whew, I feel like I did that. Right. I feel like 30%, I feel like I've done that, right?
So what are you excited for?
I'm excited about the next 2 decades.
What are you thinking? Why are you excited?
Because I really believe that everything I've done to this point, I didn't come this far to go this far. And I'm not talking about ambition or best-selling books or big shows. I really believe that my 50s and 60s, if I honor the Lord, and I do the old hymn, trust and obey, I think the 50s and 60s can be decades of great, great harvest. I think I got into this because I'm ambitious by nature. I like pressure. I have a pastor's heart. I do love people. Like, I love people. Like, whatever I do, Lauren, I've got to be somehow, even if it's behind the scenes. And I believe I'll have the humility if God takes me away from the front. But I also believe, Kay, that God's given me a voice. So I'm just in this weird deal where it's like, and I'm very happy at Ramsey, and it's going great. But I think the next 2 decades are super exciting when it comes to influence. And I don't mean like I got a lot of social media followers. I don't mean that kind of crap. I don't mean like influencer. I mean like influence. And I think the best is yet to be, right? Like I went to Liberty University and I got to know Jerry Falwell Sr. And I'll say this about Jerry. He's a great man. And he once said, he preached a message at chapel, and he said this, he goes, I believe the man or woman of God is indestructible until God's done with them. So I don't know if I got till tomorrow. I don't know. But if I've got 2 more decades, I'm super jacked about what God's doing in me right now. Like what he's doing in me is far more exciting than anything I've ever done professionally. And I really mean that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think there's a boldness that I have, and I want him to harness that boldness. Because if I'm where I'm supposed to be, I'm fearless. So what does that look like? Answer is today, I don't know.
All right, well, we do have an audience here.
I love it.
And we wanted to open up if anyone had any questions for Ken.
Anybody? Can I help anybody? Can I coach you through something? Your business, your leadership? If not, we'll keep going.
Ken, what books have you written to date? Because obviously books are an expression of passion, of interest that you've had that has been helpful, that can help a broader audience. What are some of the books that you've written?
First book I wrote was called One Question. Really cool idea where I sat down with some of the biggest names throughout the world of all channels of society and asked them all one different question. And I was doing that because I wanted to prove the value of one question. Like, if you get to be with somebody that you admire, don't tell them how much you admire them because they've heard that before. Have a question ready to go and watch what happens. They will unlock with you, and you never know. You could build a relationship off of one really, really thought out question. So that was that book. That was fun. There's 34 different one-question interviews. Second book was called The Proximity Principle. Came up with that at a stoplight. I was sitting at a stoplight, and I was going to the office, and I looked at an email. It was my first thing that morning. I was going to be on somebody's podcast, and one of the questions they asked is, if you could boil down your success to one thing, what would it be? And I was like, it's a horrible question, but let me try to serve this. And I worked for Maxwell for years. So being around Maxwell, who's the ultimate communicator, he thinks in principles. And so I was sitting at the stoplight, and I was like, how did I do it in the early 30s and get into broadcasting against all odds? And I was like, I put myself around the right people in the right places. So then the proximity principle came to me, and I held my phone up to my mouth, and I recorded it, and I said, the proximity principle says, in order to do what I want to do, I got to be around the people that are doing it and in the places where it's happening. So the formula to that principle is the right people plus the right places equals opportunity. So to encourage our audience, if you're struggling to find an opportunity in your life, I can tell you right now, you aren't putting yourself around the right people enough, and you aren't putting yourself in the right places. Because here's what happens. When I'm around the right people, two things happen. They introduce me to more of the right people. That's K. And when I'm in the right places, I meet more of the right people. So it becomes this cycle. And so that's where opportunity happens. So the third book was From Paycheck to Purpose, and that was the 7 stages of figuring out what you're supposed to do with your life professionally. So there's 7 stages: get clear, get qualified, get connected, get started, get promoted, get the dream job, give yourself away. So it's a stage book, 7 stages. The 4th book is called Find the Work You're Wired to Do, and it has an assessment with it that measures 3 things: what you do best, what you love to do most, and the results that motivate you. So that's my signature assessment. It's called the Get Clear Assessment. So those are the 4 books.
Ken, how do you do it? Do you have a time? Do you have time set aside every day for writing? Do you go away for a few weeks at a time? What do you do?
Yeah. So the question was, how do I write a book? What do I do? It's a combination. First thing we do is we examine the idea. So does it have legs? So I'll get together with 3 or 4 people that I really trust that give me honest feedback. It's a very collaborative process. I actually did it with Kay, and we get on a whiteboard and we take the idea, the concept, and I look at it through this framework. Does it clearly define a problem? Is there a clear solution? And is there a compelling reason for the solution? And so if this idea, so the proximity principle, what problem does it solve? And so you walk through this. So once we get to that, we go, okay, we got a basic outline, right? And then we start working through, so we'll do probably 2 or 3 90-minute sessions, whiteboard sessions, where we got a note taker. It looks like a beautiful mind on the whiteboard. And we come away with, this is an outline. And so at that point, I begin the writing process. And sometimes I get away, but sometimes I'll just take a 3-hour block. And I work best with a writer. So, in other words, every one of my books, you could go to any page and ask me about it, and I can tell you, because I've written my books. But I work with a writer. So I would liken it to people who write music. When you get 2 songwriters in there, or an artist and a songwriter, it's a better collaboration. And I'm better when I have a professional writer, and they interview me. And so we record the sessions. And so then we send it off and get the whole thing. I'm mic'd up, and we get the whole thing, what's the word?
Transcribed.
Thank you, transcribed. And then they write it, give it back to me, and I fully edit it. That's my process, because I'm a collaborative. I'm a true collaborative. My best creativity is collaborative. In other words, I'm really good at coming up with thoughts, but short form thoughts. That's why I'm better on TV, or like if I'm standing up, giving a keynote, and then I take Q&A from the crowd. I'm at my best when I'm but to write a long form book, 15,000 words, 45,000 words, 60,000 words, I do better in a collaborative thing. And so you got to know what kind of creative you are. And I'm a collaborative. So that's how I write, is with somebody. So it's not like days away and in a log cabin. I don't function well like that. I need reverb, is what I call it. I need to hear something back. And I need to talk it out. Because when I hear it, I go, oh, that's good. Or I go, oh, that's not very good. Like, I think it's a good idea, and then I start talking it out, and then I go, oh, that sucks.
All right, I got a question for you. You got to listen to what I'm asking on this, though. What is the coolest person situation that you have been involved with? I don't mean the biggest celebrity. It might be the biggest celebrity. But it could be somebody like, nobody knows like me, but what is the coolest situation you've been in to do something like that?
You mean professionally?
Professionally. Or not professionally, even one-on-one, sitting at Papa P's and having a cigar with somebody. Could be anything.
I don't know if this answer will ever change if you ask me. I've been asked this a lot. It's the same now. I think it'll be when I die. I was working for John Maxwell, and he had these big simulcasts, 90,000 people, and we had booked Coach K, the legendary Duke coach, to be one of the speakers. By the way, Kevin Small was running the company. And for those of you who know Kevin Small, he's part of this Holy Smokes community. And I'm going to tell this as fast as I can because it's a crazy story. So Coach K calls us 3 weeks out and he goes, I've never done this before. I got to cancel. My best friend is Steve Wynn. He's opening up Wynn Las Vegas. We're best friends with he and his wife. They invited us to go. I got to go. I'll give you your money back. I'll do an interview because I know you've advertised me for this simulcast. So my boss at the time who was running the company, a guy by the name of Kevin Small, calls me in his office in a panic, tells me that. He goes, what are we going to do? I said, well, you got to do the interview, I think, because that way you can still get content, and see if he'll do it for a reduced fee. He said, oh, he'll do that. So he says, who's going to do it? And at that time, broadcasting wasn't on my radar screen. I thought I was going to run for office, and I'm working for Maxwell. So I called the voice of the Atlanta Braves, who I'd met at a leadership event, and I said, Bob, here's the deal. Will you do it? He goes, I'll do it. Here are the dates I can do it. We matched it up. I said to Kevin, I set this up. I'm the biggest Duke fan you know. I grew up idolizing Coach K. That's another longer story. I'm going. He goes, of course. So Rathman says to me, Bob says, I'll do it, but you got to write the interview for me. I go, done. So I go buy Coach's book, Leading from the Heart. I digest it, dog ear it, red ink everywhere, still have that copy. And I write the interview for Bob. So Bob calls 3 days before. He goes, you're not going to believe this. We had a rain out. And Major League Baseball scheduled the makeup game on the day I'm supposed to go. I can't go. So I go to Kevin Small and I go, here's the deal. He's freaking out. He goes, there's 3 or 4 of us in the room. He goes, guys, we got to do this. What are we going to do? And Gabe Lyons, some of you may know Gabe, lives in this area. My best man, I was his best man. He looks at me and he goes, can you do it? And I went, I can do it. It's like one of those things you volunteer for and you're not sure you can do it, but your heart says yes. Yeah. And your brain's going, what in the ever-living hell have you just committed yourself to? A major wrestling match.
Here am I, send me.
Yes. And so fast forward, go there that day. Coach walks out. It's he and I sitting knee to knee in the middle of Coach K court, Cameron Indoor. I'm so nervous. I got no liquid in my mouth. Start the interview. 2 questions in, I start to really feel a sense of comfort come over me. I had, back in the day, you had no technology, so all my questions were on 3x5 index cards. And we go for 30 minutes. This is how long ago this is, Lauren. We ran out of tape, and so we had to stop, and you change the tape. That's how, long ago it was. There was no little card that you could go for 2 hours, And so we're sitting there, and he leans forward. This is the moment. He leans forward to me, pats me on the knee, and he goes, I'm enjoying this so much. And I'm looking at Brad Lomenick. By the way, Brad Lomenick is producing this. He's standing there, and I look at Brad, and then Coach goes, you know my book backwards and forwards, don't you? And I take the book off my lap, and I flip through it, and he sees it, and he smiles, and he goes, you remind me of one of my best friends. And I'm like, and he says, you remind me of a young Charlie Rose. Now, Charlie Rose at that time, one of the gold standards, this is before he got outed as a creeper. Okay, you got to give context for that. But Coach is giving me this compliment. No one's around but just me and this producer. And I'm looking at Brad to go, is this happening? And it was that moment, because I was beginning to wrestle through, is broadcasting this weird pizza thing? Is it vanity? I got no training. And the rest of that interview, God just hugged me, That was the first interview I'd ever done in my life.
Wow.
Was Coach K. So that's the answer to that question, because it wasn't just because it was cool, because it was personal. It was God confirming all of this. So that's crazy. So that was, to this day, that was like, here's the rest of the story. So Coach shakes hands. We talk for about 15 minutes. I got pictures, all this stuff. It's crazy. He leaves. And I go sit on the Duke bench in my suit. The crew's breaking down. His assistant walks in with a basketball. My favorite sport growing up was basketball. I was a tough little point guard, but didn't have the physical tools to play the next level. And she comes out and says, Ken, Coach loved it. She goes, we got an hour before they shut the gym down. If you guys want to shoot around, be my guest. She bounces the ball to me. So Brad Lomenick witnessed all this. I take my suit coat off. I dribble up to the three-point line, and I shoot the ball. And for any guy that's ever played basketball, there are times when you shoot it, you know it's in. And I held the form. I knew it was in. And as God is my witness, and Brad Lomenick and the crew will tell you, it didn't even hit the rim. Nothing but net.
And
this
you're like, where's Coach K? Why didn't he watch it?
No, I didn't even care at that moment. The crew went nuts. They were like, it's just three of us. 3 guys and me. And I said in that moment, I go, I'm not going to shoot another shot.
You drained a 3.
And it's a true story. It's a true story. And I went and sat down. I said, this is going to be a story that I'll share the rest of my life. And it's the opening story in one question.
That's awesome.
So I got goosebumps telling you that.
That's so cool. I got goosebumps listening.
That's probably my favorite moment. I mean, that's just that is crazy. They talk about not feeling, like knowing you don't belong. But then you're truly, and again, not over-spiritualizing, you're going, God, this is all you. Like that whole story, I share it so that people get the orchestration there. Because I was in a season of, what am I going to do? And talk about a God hug. That was stupid.
You know what the coolest part about all of that and this is that you're just Ken.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody that's sitting around here right now is in here, but you're just Ken. Like,
well, that's
you're the Ken that did an interview with Coach K and, with all these people, but you're just Ken, and that's such a testament to you.
I hope I stay that way. If I don't, you punch me right in the Adam's.
And I will.
I know.
But you are, but you're just Ken, and that's what we love about you.
Yeah,
it's so awesome.
I appreciate that, but I think, we were talking about this at a group of guys this morning. I was talking about this. I go, one of the things that's been so healing for me is that I'm developing relationships, and deep relationships with about 3 or 4 dudes, and every dude needs those guys. You know what's great about those dudes? They don't give a crap about what I do. In other words, they celebrate and they cheer, but they're not friends with me because of that. And we don't talk about any of this crap. They're just like, I'm just Ken.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that loves to tell a slightly off-color joke, and like we're just dealing with the same stuff. And, that's the key, is being surrounded by guys that don't care about any of that. But thanks for asking, but that's just...
That's awesome. Well, humbling moment. I didn't even know what you did for the first 3 or 4 months.
Great. I'm glad. That's a good testimony.
No earthly idea.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I mean, who wants to lead with that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's good stuff
Listen to
to
what
get
you
you
said
punched in the
earlier
throat.
about some of the stuff you're going through right now. Just keep that in the back of your mind. You're just Ken to a lot of us. You're just a friend.
Well, and that's...
You're just a friend, which is a true testament.
By the way, that's why I do Holy Smokes. I believe that cigars are bridges to bros.
Yeah.
It's a bridge to another brother, and it's so much better when you got this in your hand. And I think that that's the beauty of Holy Smokes.
There's a saying that we have in Holy Smokes where we say that a cigar is nothing more than a prop to build a relationship.
Yep.
It slows a man down
100%.
for 20, 30 minutes
100%.
so that it can engage. Because all us type A people, we're going, we're always talking, but we don't actively listen.
I agree.
And engage and really understand. And Holy Smokes, too, is so important. You pick up on the nonverbals. You talk about nonverbals. Well, 80% of the communication is nonverbal.
Right.
But you have to be engaged and present to make that happen.
Right. There's something practical to the idea of the cigar, too, because if you're talking too much, that means they've been asking you a lot of questions or you're talking too much. So when you got to relight, it's a great way to go, I should probably start asking them some questions. Or there's an actual, I thought about
cultural
this.
awkwardness. Yeah.
Like it's got a good rhythm. Yes, sir.
Second question. This is a 2-part question.
I love 2-part
First one's easy. What's your wife's name?
Stacy.
Stacy. If she was here being interviewed, and we asked her, Stacy, what's the best thing about Ken? What would she say?
What would my wife say is the best thing about me?
Besides the sex.
Somebody said besides the sex. That's why I had a long pause. I was trying to.
Cancel that. Oh, wait, no, I can't.
I was trying to figure out how to word that.
You're editing in real time here.
Your level of intimacy.
Yeah. I think she would say that I care more about her and the kids than anything else. None of this stuff that I get to do, which is super cool. I tell people routinely, it beats working for a living. I mean, I get paid to talk, and most of the time share my opinion. Everybody's favorite thing is their own opinion. But I think she would say that I wasn't willing to sacrifice them at any point to be bigger. Because that's the game. That's the game I'm in. I'm in the game of build your brand, bigger sales, all of that. And that can eat you up. So I think she'd say that. This guy's getting me choked up, man. It's crazy. By the way, I'm a crier, so, you know, it is what it is.
That's good. That's good. Ken Coleman, thanks for being on the Holy Smokes podcast. Let's get to rapid fire questions.
Okay, here we go.
Rapid fire. Fire. Here.
The first question I normally ask is, what you smoking? I forgot to ask that one.
What am I smoking, Kay?
Hoya de Monterey.
A Hoya de Monterey. Very, very fine stick from a fine man.
It's treating you good then.
Kay gifted me for this. Yeah.
Okay, gifts some really good cigars.
Okay.
When did you first try cigars or pipe?
1992, my hero in all of the world was Rush Limbaugh because I was a college Republican, and Rush made cigars famous, and he was smoking an Opus X, and I couldn't afford that, so I started off with a Swisher Sweet. True story. I don't even know if that counts, but that was the first time I put tobacco between my lips was a Swisher Sweet.
When's your birthday?
July 22nd.
Okay, so I'm just a couple months older than you.
Yeah.
So I remember. My first was the Philly Blunt from the gas station.
That's great. Yeah, we were in the same lane. Yeah. And I thought it was the greatest thing I ever had.
I thought it was awesome too.
I
My
thought it
college
was-
roommates made so much fun of me because
Yeah.
they were like,
I
"You
couldn't
look
believe how sweet
ridiculous."
it was. It was great.
Yeah. They said, "You look ridiculous," and I'm like, "No, I feel like a man."
No, it was great.
Ever try pipe?
Yes.
What do you prefer?
I prefer the flavor of a pipe, but I have not mastered it from, you got to really know how to pack it and burn it to stay with it. I do enjoy a pipe. I like the flavor of the pipe more, no question about it. But functionally, cigars are easier, and I have ADHD, so I'm a cigar guy. A lot easier to maintain.
Well, I just picked up some of Papa P's pipe blends that
Pretty
they've
good.
got here, and
Pretty good.
I'm taking 3 back with me to Colorado.
I love it.
They're
I
awesome.
love it. Thanks, guys.
Favorite cigar?
A Cuban Monte Cristo number 3.
Does it have anything to do with Scent of a Woman? And that was Al Pacino's stick?
No, when I first started sampling Cuban cigars, the Monte Cristo number 3 was recommended to me by a mentor. I loved it. The Padron 64th Anniversary Series is also up there. And the Late Hour Davidoff these are 3 of my regular smokes that are 3 of my favorites.
What's your best dollar for dollar cigar that's in your humidor? It's just great value for the buck.
I'll go with the Dominican Monte Cristo. I think from a value standpoint, I really like Monte Cristo. I think that's probably what I'd go with.
Where's your go-to place to get your smokes?
Right here, Papa P's.
What's your splurge cigar?
Opus X. Anything in that, I try to just have some fun with that. But I mean, I like to go, anything, the high dollar Padrones, the, Cohibas, I'm always trying to sample. So if I'm splurging, I'm going to the expensive drawers of those brands, Certainly Davidoff. I mean, you can't go wrong.
What's your favorite liquid pairing with your smoke?
Rum.
On this trip,
rum.
I have had more guys say rum, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's rare that it comes up on the podcast.
I'll tell you what it would be. It would be, I'll be specific. I'll go with, just because it's it's the oldest rum brand in the world. That's Mount Gay rum from Barbados. A high-proof, spiced Mount Gay rum. You got to put some ice in it because it'll light you on fire. I mean, I think that Mount Gay is probably a 128 proof. So I got to put a little ice in it, but I'm sipping it. And so the ice calms it. But I find that the spiced rum, to me, pairs better than a bourbon. That's me. But I'll tell you this, I don't mind a port either. Take a really good, sweet, thick port with a bold cigar. That's also a nice pairing.
Most interesting person you've ever met through cigars?
Man, that's a
Not
good
named
question.
Kay.
I was going to say, Kay's up there. He's one of the most interesting men on the planet.
He comes up so often. I've got to add that.
You feel like that's the answer every time?
Yeah. So.
I'm about ready to meet him. I can't pull his name because my team's been working on it. But there's some old dude out of Texas or something that's got this massive YouTube channel, and he gives young men advice. And he's like lo-fi. I think he's probably going to be that guy over a cigar. I feel like Mike Rowe is probably up there. First time I met Mike, I had a cigar with him. And Mike from Dirty Jobs, Mike's become a real friend now. I've been on his show. I'd say Mike Rowe, if I can't say K.
Nice. Most memorable cigar experience?
Has to be smoking in the Dominican Republic on the beach with my oldest son and his buddies. It was their senior spring break, and we bought them a bunch of cigars. And through a mutual friend of ours, Pichu, took me to a great cigar factory in the Dominican. We bought a great box, and it was several dads and our sons. And to smoke with my oldest son on the beach in the Dominican, I'd have to say that's top drawer. His first cigar
Nice.
was great.
Nice. Non-cigar questions. Marvel or DC?
Marvel,
Even as a kid?
yes.
Who was
Because
your
how do you top
superhero?
Batman?
Batman's DC.
Oh boy, that blew up in my face. Tells you how much I know. I just like the Marvel movies more. So I guess as a kid it was Batman and Superman. I knew Superman was DC. I always thought Batman was.
Were you a fellow Super Friends fan?
Yeah, I love Super Friends. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Aquaman underwater.
Oh, yeah, man, that was
The
awesome.
cartoon, not the. I don't like the movie with what's his name. But I would say over time, my favorite superhero has become Iron Man. I'd like to have that suit. That's pretty cool. I'm an Iron Man guy.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Sports teams. Duke, you said.
Yeah, I grew up watching Duke basketball, fell in love with them as a kid. But I'm a big Michigan football fan. My dad went to Michigan, so I'm a huge Michigan football fan. In college football, I love the Tennessee Titans, even though we've sucked for a long time. Long-time Titan fan. In the NFL, so those are the teams I cheer for.
Favorite athlete growing up?
Magic Johnson.
What kinds of music do you love?
Man, I got a wide range. I love jazz. I love Sinatra, Harry Connick Jr. I love country music. I love 80s and 90s rock. Some big hair bands in there. Some REM, some Black Crowes, some NXS, U2. Those are some of my favorites.
Favorite food?
It's got to be Mexican food, man. A great burrito with some chips and queso and guac. Some strong, light your eyeballs on fire salsa.
Dogs, cats, neither, or both?
Dogs.
What kind of dog? For your ideal breed?
Oh, a doodle.
Yeah.
Doodles are basically humans.
Nickname growing up or in college?
Nickname growing up was Doc. My second or third grade teacher knew I was a pastor's kid, and so he called me Doc, and it stuck all the way through middle school. But then I've never had a nickname since that.
What's one unusual fact few people know about you?
That I was a pretty good chess player in middle school. I'm rusty now. I don't know how good I'd be right now. I could function, but
Yeah.
somebody who's sharp right now could wear me out. But I used to be pretty good.
Yeah. Have you or someone you know deeply trust experienced something unexplainable, unusual? Could be a miracle, could be UFOs are in the news.
I got nothing on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite 1 to 3 books not titled the Holy Bible?
Okay. No particular order. I'll give you 3 books. The Art of Power by John Meacham, Pulitzer Prize winning Nashvilleian, and that's about Thomas Jefferson. It's my favorite biography. A book written by envelope magnet Harvey Mackay called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. My dad gave it to me as a graduation gift. It's all about connecting. And what a fabulous concept. How to dig your well before you're thirsty. The real art of connecting or net weaving, as we would say for our man K here. And then I would say it is how to win friends and influence people. I mean, I could rotate my top three, it'd be hard, but the first two for sure. The third, I think that's a gold standard. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Do you have a scripture that's really, really meaningful, either for your life or at this point in your life?
Yeah, Psalm 139, 13, 14, David talks about, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I know that your works are wonderful. And he's talking about himself. And I think that scripture. And then I think Hebrews, without faith it is impossible to please God. I would say that those two are two of my favorites. Again, hard to pick there. It's probably about 10.
Name 3 things you're thankful for at this point in your life.
These are really good questions. 3 things? All right. Well, I got to go. Salvation, my family, and my friends.
If you were stranded on a desert island with only one movie, what would it be?
With only what?
One movie. What would it be?
Oh, Hoosiers. It's the greatest sports movie of all time. I would need to be inspired to keep collecting coconuts. That would fire me up.
If you could be any animal, what would you be?
I think an elephant.
Why?
No one's going to jack with me. Pretty much go where I want to go, when I want to go. Powerful.
Are you an early riser, a night owl, or kind of normal?
Early riser.
What time do you normally get up?
6 a.m.
If you could live anywhere, where would you live?
The Caribbean.
Why? What is it that draws you about?
Oh, I got you. The sun, the sand, the sea, the salt, cigars, the people, and the cocktails. Oh, thank you, sir.
Kay just brought him a port.
That's where I want to finish, is the Caribbean. If by the way, if we get a good enough head start on a nuclear holocaust, I'm going somewhere down there, and I'm going to have some good smokes, some really good strong rum, some seafood, and I'm going to be lighting up on the beach when the missile hits, baby. He said, if you could live anywhere, the Caribbean for me. I mean, it's the greatest place in the world.
What's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness?
My greatest strength is my ability to communicate. My greatest weakness is my fear that I'm not going to be enough. I'm working on that one. We're going to get that. We're going to heal from that. But I think that right now is my greatest weakness.
When you feel overwhelmed or have lost your focus, what do you do to reset?
Gratitude. So I try to get grounded pretty quickly with everything that's good that I got in my life. And that gets you into a good headspace where you have the perspective now to deal with whatever it is you're dealing with.
What purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months or recent memory?
Okay. I was in New York recently with my wife, and she told me my daughter wants this new thing that's a big deal, a jelly cat. It's like it's the newest rage. It's like a stuffed piece of food or something. And that cost me $60. I was like, $60 for a stuffed waffle? But when I brought it home and gave it to my 16-year-old daughter, that had the biggest impact. That was a big $60 purchase. Like, that was great. So I'd say that one.
That's awesome. Who's been the greatest influence in your life?
It has to be my wife. Because all of the changes and all the growth and maturity is to be better for her. So I've been with her 27 years. We're coming up on 28 years of marriage. That's the one. She's had the most influence on me.
Who's the first person you think of when you hear the word successful? Success means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So for you, who's the first person you think of?
It's too late because that's such a boom question. I'm going to tell you what came to my mind.
Yeah.
This is straight out of therapy.
Yeah.
Me.
Wow. How does it feel to say that from where you've come from
it feels great.
in being vulnerable on this podcast about that journey?
Yeah, that's why it came to mind. It feels great, right? I have been successful. Like, if God calls me home today, I've been successful in the things that matter to me. And certainly, I think other people would say I'm successful, but I'm saying when I think of that, the first thing I was like, me, and I need to embrace that. Do you know what I mean? Like, stop embracing more and just embrace who I am.
What do you do for self-care, to rest, to recharge?
Yeah. I work out 4 days a week with weights. I'm a year into that, and I hadn't done it in 3 decades, and it's transformed my body. But more importantly, I'll go straight from here to the gym. And that is 4 days a week. It is a true reset. I got a buddy who is a big weightlifter, and he says, exhaust the body, tame the mind. And I think that's true. And so when you said reset and rest, it's like we as guys, we're out providing, we're going, and I'm in a pretty high pressure gig. And reset for me is physically exhausting myself. I get a massage once a month. So I have a membership where I'm getting a massage at least once a month. I play pickleball 2 to 3 times a week. That's an absolute reset of my soul. Because again, I'm playing with guys that are friends. It's not about
competition.
Competition's fun, but it's the physical nature of it. I'm exhausted when I'm done. So that's what I do to reset. And then I have a very, very rigid morning routine. And so I start off every morning in the Word, in prayer. I do a reading. I do a gratitude exercise. And I sit in the quiet before anybody else is up. And that is a daily reset. So that I'm entering the day with a sense of peace before it gets, wacky.
How do you want to be remembered?
As a really good husband, a good dad, a good friend, and a guy that gave everything he had to try to use his gift for other people.
Last 3 questions.
Okay.
What does Holy Smokes mean to you, and how has it contributed to your spiritual journey?
It means instant community. First time Kay introduced me to it, told me Friday afternoon, so I had a set schedule. I had some guys that I did know, guys that I didn't know, but all of a sudden I had instant community. That's what it means to me. How has it been for me spiritually? It's been so refreshing. Because when you can come sit with guys, go deep or not go deep, and just be another dude and surrounded by guys that are going through their own junk or celebrating their own victories, there's something powerful in the brotherhood. And so I believe we were created to relate. The root word of relationship is relate. And when you can relate to other guys, that's soul music. God created that longing in our soul to relate. So that very act of relating is spiritual.
If you could have a holy smoke with any 3 people throughout history, living or deceased, who would they be? Can't name Jesus.
Yeah. Patrick Henry.
Ooh, why?
Did you say why?
Yeah, for you. Why?
Because most people don't know who Patrick Henry is. Patrick Henry was the 4-time governor of Virginia, had tremendous influence on Jefferson. Most people know him from the Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech, but he was the guy that was holding the lamp of accountability on our founding fathers as they wrote the Bill of Rights. He had tremendous influence on George Mason, James Madison. Henry was a true patriot, and above all, Patrick Henry was fearless. So I'd love to smoke with him. I would want to smoke with Lincoln because of the...
Sadly didn't smoke cigars.
He didn't smoke, I know. I'm pretty sure Henry smoked a pipe, but do I get to keep Lincoln or no?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, people show up to Holy Smokes, they don't smoke.
I just think Lincoln, because of the period that he led in and the complexity of what was going on in that whole era and the criticism he was getting from every side, I'd want to know what made him tick.
One of my favorite movies, and I just rewatched it with my mom a few weeks ago, Spielberg's Lincoln. It's so good. It is so good.
I think it's Daniel Day-Lewis's greatest role. And then third, Reagan. I wish I had the chance to interview Reagan. I'd love to sit with Reagan and just have him tell story after story after story and watch the twinkle in his eye. And most people don't know this. I didn't realize this until coming here to Papa Peace, but Reagan did a lot of cigar ads early in his acting career, a lot of endorsed, and so it's really fun. I just bought that picture that's back there. It's now going to be on my back patio. You'll see it. You can't walk into my house from my patio without seeing that Reagan picture endorsing cigars. Yeah.
Last question.
Okay.
We're to meet 1 year from today, and I got a bottle of that Mount Gay spiced rum. Mm-hmm. What are we celebrating?
Healing.
What kind of healing?
My heart.
1 year from today. Ken Coleman, let's do it.
Yeah, make an appointment. I'm there. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, I wanted to announce that we have Holy Smokes gear. That's right, we have swag. We currently have hats, shirts, stickers like for your vehicle or your travel humidor, magnets, even branded bourbon glasses for a limited time. Go to holysmokes.club and click on the shop tab. That's holysmokes.club. I'm super proud of the shirts. They're made with Bella canvas shirts that are soft and incredibly comfortable. The hats fit wonderfully, which can be a problem for those of us with big noggins. We plan on having a lot more to offer, like Guayabera shirts, additional t-shirt designs, beanies, polos, hoodies, cigar accessories, and much more. Check it out. And even if you don't make a purchase now, be sure to sign up for that email list, as I've thrown a couple big discount coupon codes for those exclusively on that list. So click the shop tab at holysmokes.club. Thanks.